Thank you for coming. My name is Paulína and I study at the University of Iceland. So the topic that you see over there, employee motivation and satisfaction practices, was basically the topic for my master thesis. And I think I would start with telling you why I decided to kind of do the research about this. My focus was, as this title says, the motivation and satisfaction practices, but also HR, human resources in Iceland. And it started mainly because back home I was working in different companies, not related to tourism though, but most of the companies that I worked for had some sort of HR department, which was responsible for various things, from like training us or just like legal documents and things like that. And so when I came here and I started to work in tourism and many various hotels in Reykjavik, I kind of over time was realizing that I have not seen anything related to HR, or at least not, from my point of view as an employee. So then when my master thesis came, I just decided that this will be kind of the topic of my research, and I wanted to see what is the role of HR in Icelandic hotels, if there is any, and I was focusing mostly on front desk employees and their motivation and satisfaction, because I used to work as a front desk. So that was kind of how I started with it. In terms of how I did the research, so you can basically see, as all master thesis, you have to study your research questions. So for me, it was what practices are used in order to enhance front desk employee motivation and satisfaction. And as I said before, since I was working in different kind of hotels in Reykjavik, I knew a couple of people, managers, reception managers, hotel managers, etc. So I decided to speak to one specific hotel chain and see if they would be willing to kind of, do the interviews with me. It was a qualitative study, which means that it's, of course, limited to a certain number of participants. And for me at that time, it was enough to do interviews with 4 hotel managers or reception managers, depending on who was responsible for this area of front desk employee motivation and satisfaction. And then the rest would be the front desk employees. Of course, I was trying to talk to people who were Icelandic, non-Icelandic, but they had to work at the place at least for half a year, so that there was no one who was there just like seasonal worker or anything like that. And I have to admit that it was not an easy task to do, or I thought it would be easy because I knew most of the people. But then when it came to the actual interviews and things like that, they were maybe not that open for it. And, it took me quite a while to be able to get the appointments with them, especially with the management. I mean, the front desk, they were really nice because they saw it mostly as a break, from their work. Because, of course, the interviews were held during their time, but the managers, they were informed up front. But even then, I told them that it would take probably up to an hour, and actually some of them had like hardly half an hour time. So that was a little bit disappointing for me, but anyways, you have to continue with the research. So the front desk was chosen just based on the managers, or who was willing to participate. As I said, I had certain conditions, what they had to fulfill, but other than that, it didn't really matter to me. And if it was hotel manager or reception manager, that again depended on who in the specific hotel was responsible for, basically for the front desk. So at the end, from the 4 hotels, it was 1 hotel manager and 3 reception managers. When I made the questions, and it was open-ended questions, I wanted to know, basically, I was giving them questions about HR, if the whole hotel chain has any kind of human resource department. They didn't have to have it, so I didn't know. What is the role of it, or if they even know, if they themselves have any knowledge about it, and what kind of role it plays when it comes to front desk motivation and satisfaction. So I was trying to examine what are the current practices, what is being applied, if anything, and how, or who is responsible for that. So, when you start to do the research, of course, you can't kind of omit doing some kind of theory. So for me, the background was mostly about HR within the hospitality industry, and then various motivation and satisfaction practices and other things, but I'll get to it later. Just shortly, you don't have to read all of it, but when I was doing the theoretical research, there wasn't much or almost anything actually done in Iceland. So everything what I had to put as a basis was from abroad. And when you think specifically for HR in hospitality industry, it's very specific. Most of the studies or books or whatever I was reading was kind of focusing on the problems that HR is facing. Things like that no one really knows how to put HR in the tourism and hotel industry, what are its tasks, how to delegate the tasks, who is responsible for what, because in many cases the most common used model that is working is kind of, it's called decentralized model, meaning that the managers are doing most of the tasks, or not most, or some of the tasks that HR is supposed to do. And then also that usually the hotels are kind of focusing on the short term rather than long-term management, which, you know, I mean, we all know how high turnover it is in tourism industry. So I think there was a time to do something about it, and HR can help with that. Then when it comes to this job motivation and satisfaction factors and practices, you know, most of the studies that I was going through were generalizing all employees. So basically, even if you read about what are the most factors that influence motivation and satisfaction, it was always about like all hotel workers, or it wasn't really anywhere about specific workers, so definitely not about front desk. And then all of them were like case studies, meaning like one study from Greece, one from Venezuela, etc. So it wasn't anything in general. So even my study is in a way this case study. So it, you know, there isn't anything general that you can read about this. The reason why I think it's important is, you know, I was asking myself, like, so, or if you ask yourselves, why is it important to have motivated and satisfied employees, you know, especially in hotel industry? All these studies prove that it has effect on performance, on how long people stay in the job, on lowering turnover rates, all these kind of, even customer satisfaction, of course, because if the employees are happy, then usually the customers are happy, and the front desk employees are the faces of each hotel. So, you know, they come into contact with customers at the beginning and at the end, so it's extremely important. And then I was also focusing on internal marketing because it's one of the maybe most effective strategies or HR strategies when it comes to employee motivation and satisfaction. As a base, I chose the study that you see over there, because that gave me kind of like a maybe frame for what I was researching, and I was trying to see if all these five, well, you probably can't see it very well, but if role clarity, then reward systems, work environment, evaluation of management, and organizational performance, if in some or another way, or how is it being, you know, talked about in the hotels, implemented, if there's something done within these 5 areas for front desk employees. And now to the practical thing, which is probably the most important or most interesting to me, actually. So after conducting these interviews with managers and with front desk, I think it was actually extremely important to have both groups, because while doing interviews, I realized how different point of view they had on everything almost. So, you know, it might be that either they don't communicate or they don't really want to say the truth, or, you know, you never know. But while doing this, I realized a couple of discrepancies. However, so there was an HR department for this specific hotel chain. It's a well-established hotel chain in Iceland, and it employs hundreds of people. And after talking to the management, I realized that this HR department has 1 or 2 people working there. They didn't even know themselves. So having one person working for, you know, 300 people, that's just basically nonsense from the beginning. So I knew, you know, right away that probably there's not going to be much from the side of HR. But anyways, I was asking them further on. Most of neither the managers, neither the front desk didn't really know, what the HR is responsible for. Like the management was kind of, they always talked about some, like maybe legal paperwork or like very general stuff, but there wasn't definitely anything done towards employees, and so no strategies, no policies, nothing like that. And honestly, the front desk employees, they sometimes didn't even know that the HR exists. So that was really like kind of a huge thing for me. And, while talking to the managers, I realized that usually all the functions that are assigned to HR, like training or hiring or also this employee motivation practices, were basically left up on the management, but automatically, like there wasn't any rule, there wasn't any structure, so whoever was working in the hotel as a manager somehow automatically was assigned these people management skills as well. So many of the managers, when I talked to them, did not have any background, university background, practical background, nothing. So if you think of it that they somehow got into that position, well, that would be another topic to investigate, how did they get there, but that's not, for now. They of course had no knowledge, so for them, they were doing their best in a way, but there was no structure. So all the hotels, although they belonged to the same hotel chain, were run very individually. So the size of them were slightly different, but either way, they really had almost nothing in common. So when you read through this, of course, when I was trying to get more information about the specific practices for motivation and satisfaction, there were some which I will talk about later, but none of them were applied with the specific purpose to actually do something for the employees. That was all done somehow accidentally or, by itself, so to say. This is just some quotes for you, maybe, from what I did. So this is from the managers or front desk. As you can see, one said, there are two people, they are either way too overworked or they don't do anything. HR has not really been part of Icelandic work culture. Or the last one, there is no HR department in this hotel for the whole hotel chain. I honestly don't know, it just never comes up. So, this was like going on and on. It was just similar quotes. I just put some of them here so that you can imagine what kind of answers I was basically getting. But back to the specific findings. So, as I said, I based it on the study at the beginning, which was focusing on those 5 main areas. So first was the role clarity. The role clarity means basically training. For front desk employees, just from very common sense, when you think of it, the training is basically essential because you work with booking systems, you work with customers, so you're the one who deals with customers with complaints and things like that. So you need to know what you're doing. Unfortunately, after speaking to the front desk, basically the training periods, methods, everything was different from person to person. So not even in the same hotel, they didn't get the same training. So what was interesting for me, on the other hand, was that the managers actually were all claiming that they provide good training and that is sufficient. And so, I could see that it's not true because clearly it was not working. People are very disappointed by how little knowledge they have about what they're doing, and sometimes, they didn't get any training at all. So they were just like thrown into the work. One even interesting thing about this was that at the time when I was there, the specific hotel chain was getting a new booking system or new invoicing system. So it's something that is used in all the hotels for the whole hotel chain. And even for this one thing that is like, everybody has to know how to use it. Even then, the managers were not trained for it, and neither the front desk. So it worked the way that they just got the system and they were learning by themselves how to use it. Okay, let's go to the reward systems. As I mentioned before, it was purely dependent on the managers in the hotel. They actually seem to be, nice in a way that they have really good working relationships with their employees, which is one of the things that is important for motivation and satisfaction. So this was one of the things that actually was on a good level when it comes to like personal recognition or, you know, just like appraisal or things like that. Like people felt that they were appreciated, and if they did something good, like the managers actually were really trying to tell them that they're doing a good job. However, on the other hand, you know, this is not the only kind of incentive that a person can get, and so many people think of things like having higher salaries or maybe better career opportunities, or just like different kind of incentives, like more social activities done by the hotel. And so one of the few things that all the front desk got was basically like vouchers for restaurants. They could go for trips, they could get, you know, free transportation to the airport, but this is not provided by the hotel. You know, so again, we came to the thing that from the hotel itself or HR, there was basically nothing done, except that some of the managers were nice in a way that they were buying, you know, like pizzas from their own money or ice cream or something like that, just to make the work environment somehow a little bit better. They were doing things like getting commissions from maybe selling trips or from selling upgrades for rooms and things like that. But again, this was different in each hotel. Some hotels divided the commissions for everyone, others assigned it individually, so there was just no system. I mean, you as a person working, wherever you're working, you probably want to know, I mean, if there will be kind of any reward associated to your work, you know, if you do well, are you going to get something for it? Here, you know, as I said, it was so random that they were kind of just happy with whatever they got in a way. And there was only one hotel that had kind of prices for good TripAdvisor reviews. So, but as I said, this was just like one thing done by one hotel manager, and the rest had it differently. Then the work environment. That is a thing that maybe includes a lot of things, but I just pointed out a couple that I think are the most important ones. When it came to the delegation of tasks, I have to say that the front desk actually felt that they are okay with what they're doing. They actually wanted to do more because they didn't want to just do the check-in and then done. So they were some of the things that the reception managers would normally do were transferred on to the front desk employees, but they were okay with it. They kind of felt like that makes them feel more important, and or, you know, that they're just a little bit important for the company, although there was no feedback back. However, when it came to career opportunities, that I find myself maybe the saddest in that sense that if you work for a big hotel chain, I believe person who wants to kind of progress in their work want to know if there is a way how you can maybe change department or get hired, just like become a reception manager or maybe work in event management or something like that. That is of course different in small companies. I'm not talking about some, you know, local guest houses and things like that. That's a little bit different case. But here, after talking to them, it turned out that there was a possibility for a promotion, but only within the reception department. So again, it depended if someone left or, you know, how well you got along with the management and things like that. However, when it came to, you know, going to, for example, accounting department, because many of the people who work at the front desk have degrees from law, you know, accounting, economics. It's not always just very low-skilled workers, and there was no way for them how to do anything else than just work at the reception. So, although the managers kind of suggested that of course there is a way, and yeah, you know, the company sending emails and via Facebook and I don't know what, none of the front desk I talked to even had an idea about it. And they said that if there was an open position, they usually heard it from someone, like a friend of friend and things like that. So none of them actually had the opportunity to even apply for that, and for some of them not speaking Icelandic was a limit, but that's kind of understandable. And maybe the last thing, you know, there was no presentation. What I mean by corporate culture or introduction of the owners, many of the front desk workers expressed a real interest in knowing where the company is going or who actually are the owners. They never met them. And the problem was that there were a lot of rumors in that hotel. So they heard that one hotel will be closed, another will be open, then they heard they will be fired and all that. But no one knew for sure. They had no one to ask. So there was no, no one explained to them where the company is going, or are they going to open maybe more hotels, or what's the plan. I think that's really important, because if you know, again, that you have the possibility to work in one hotel to maybe work your way up or something like that, it also contributes to how happy you are at the workplace. But this was just this was also a problem for the management, not only for the front desk workers. They were saying the same, that they see the owners once a year and usually by Christmas party and things like that. So and these last two things, when it comes to the motivation and satisfaction. So evaluation of managers, I was giving them questions if there is a way how they can express their opinion towards the management. So I was hoping maybe that there would be, if you have a problem with your employer, who you go to. In bigger companies where there is an HR department, you have the chance at least to go to someone and maybe speak about your superior if you have a problem with them. Since the HR was just not involved here anyhow, most of the front desk just said they would just try to speak directly with whoever they would have a problem, but there was no evaluation system, so they could never express if they actually don't like something. One hotel or one manager from one hotel said that there was a questionnaire created by HR that was sent to all the hotels, and that was supposed to be about how the hotel is doing and if people, like working there and how do they like their management. And there were two questions about the management. But then again, this manager claimed that it was sent all over. The rest of the hotels never heard of it. So I don't know. I think it was just an attempt, but again, not really finished. It would be maybe nice to do it. Maybe by now, if I would go back there, they would have done something. I don't know. It would be nice to follow up on this. And then the organizational performance. I mentioned that before in a way, but usually when it comes to bigger hotel chain or a bigger company, people tend to kind of identify themselves maybe that they like to work for a certain company. This is a big hotel chain, and so I was hoping that maybe this would also play a role for them. Very few people actually expressed their interest in this, and the managers at all. So this factor didn't seem to influence the motivation or satisfaction at all. But only one manager mentioned that the people have to wear company colors, and that they like doing that, and they like to identify themselves with the company. But as I said, it wasn't really an important factor in this specific case. So all in all, this is for you maybe a little summary of what was actually working and what was not. There are more things on that side, unfortunately. So these are all connected to the management when I think of it. It's just how, because they were nice people, they were trying to make it nice there, have open communication. So this kind of worked, or working relationships. The rest that should be that where the HR should be involved as well. That was just on a very bad state. Also, for example, I forgot to mention low salaries. So all the front desk was paid, of course, by the union law. So they were getting the basic salary that you can get for that work. No one says that they can't get more, but unfortunately, they don't see it as a investment in a person to pay them adequately. They see it just like a burden. In a way, many of them mentioned that their salaries are not even being processed correctly or not on time. So this is again definitely something that did not contribute to their satisfaction, because every single month they had to fight for having their salaries getting right. So but that's one of the factors. Some more quotes. You don't have to read them all again, but this is just about everything what I was basically saying. For example, I would pick up the third one. one of the managers said, I can't change the wages, not allowed to do that, not even hotel manager can do that, the owners and the accounting can. And you are eligible to ask for a pay rise, but I don't know if the hotel would actually give it to you. When I was even speaking to the front desk, they actually thought that if they work hard enough, they're going to get pay rise, which was really sad because I knew it's not going to happen, but I couldn't tell them. And then, you know, the managers knew from the beginning. They just told me that's just not going to happen. But on the other hand, you know, when you read the last one, I think work relationships are pretty good. Casual, our manager is a really great manager. He just points out things you could do this and that better. He's very level-headed about it, but I don't think we have had any meetings. Yeah, he was referring to the things that I was just asking if they have some regular meetings with the management, but they don't. I mean, you know, I'm not saying it's necessary, especially in this hotel chain. As I said, the communication was on a good level, so let's say that, you know, that was not necessary. One of the last things, when I basically finished the research, I realized that there's plenty of space for future research. Like, it looks to me that it has not been researched in Iceland at all, and it doesn't even been really interesting for anyone so far. As one of the managers mentioned, that there isn't any HR in Iceland, was his words. So for the hotels themselves, you know, I think they should maybe deepen their knowledge in general about maybe a little bit having some kind of background. So even though maybe they don't have a university background, but still you can educate yourself in the area of management, people management, and things like that. Or just in general be interested in your employees. So this is what I would kind of recommend for them, you know, just to maybe focus on the long term, having a little bit more structure, hierarchy, and just try to maybe get some knowledge about internal marketing as well. And then for the future research, you know, as I said, this was a big hotel chain, but maybe it would be really interesting to compare it to other accommodation types, because I'm pretty sure, you know, in family-run hotels or guest houses, this structure does not really apply. You know, it's especially in small and medium like accommodation types, that this HR department is basically done by the owners. And so maybe also compare different kinds of jobs, so not only the front desk, just like maybe in general, or other hotel workers, different regions, etc. So you're here in a rural area, you know, there are plenty of little places here. It would be maybe interesting to see also how, if there is anything, or how does it work even, because I can't really even imagine myself how it is for the very tiny, you know, guest houses and things like that. And then, of course, the main reason why I did the research was what are the benefits of it, so try to maybe see the connection with performance or labor turnover, because the statistical office here in Iceland does not have any information about labor turnover when it comes to tourism industry, which I think that should be one of the first things to be done, you know. So yeah, I think that's about it. Maybe one last quote for you at the end, because this is a very successful man, Villar Marriott, founder of the Marriott Corporation, and I think he knew what he was doing. So just if you read this quote for yourselves, you can see where I was going with it. So thank you for your attention, and yeah.